It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
Hello again and welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. My co-host is Kent Myers. Kent is one of Oklahoma's top legal experts and a very special show today on The Verdict.
Yes, indeed. Last Sunday we got to hear from Dr. Tom Coburn, the Republican nominee for the United States Senate. This Sunday we're going to hear from his opponent, the Honorable Brad Carson, the representative from the 2nd Congressional District in Oklahoma and the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate race. This Senate race, Mick, as we have said last week and will again emphasize today, is getting much national attention. There's an awful lot of interest in it. Oklahoma is getting a spotlight like it has not had in very many occasions before. And we think it's part of our challenge here on The Verdict to give to our viewers as much information as we can. So our plan is this. We had Tom Coburn on last week with an ability to just say whatever he wanted to, tell the voters whatever he wanted to. We're going to have Brad Carson on today and give him the same leeway. And then in the future, we hope in October, bring them back together and let them talk to each other as well as you in a debate format. And so that when our viewers, the Verdict viewers, go to the polls in November, they will be truly an informed electorate. And we hope that you will find that useful and enjoyable.
Today on The Verdict, United States Congressman Brad Carson, a candidate for the United States Senate race. We'll be right back. You can kind of scoot over this way.
Kind of on this?
Yeah.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce our guest.
We are very pleased today to welcome back to The Verdict for his third appearance the Honorable Brad Carson, the congressman from the 2nd District here in Oklahoma, who is also the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate position in Oklahoma. Brad is a native Oklahoman. He is a Baylor University graduate where he attained the ranking of Phi Beta Kappa. He's a Rhodes Scholar. One of the first in many years from Baylor when he was selected. He came back after his study in England to attend the University of Oklahoma Law School, where he graduated with absolutely the highest honors. Since that time, he's practiced law privately and twice been elected to the 2nd District Congress seat from northeastern Oklahoma with Claremore as his home. And Brad, we're really pleased you'd return. Thanks again for coming to visit us.
Thanks, Kent. Always nice to be on here with you.
Thank you. Congressman, you've run races in your own congressional seat. Now you're running statewide. You just had a primary victory. What have you learned from traveling Oklahoma and talking to potential voters? Really
an amazing state, so diverse both geographically and kind of the features of the landscape. But everywhere I go, small towns, large towns, from the Panhandle to the furthest reach of Little Dixie, they're concerned about the same thing. Better jobs, better health care for themselves, a better future for the state, for their children, and for the country too. So very similar interests despite the diversity of the locales.
Are they suspicious at all out there? Have they heard all this before? What do you think of that angle?
I think they are rightfully suspicious of politicians always. You know, what's happening in Washington, D.C. is a long ways away. Special interests dominate the process at the expense of the average citizen, so they are suspicious. But they're also hungry for good ideas, bright ideas that can, get this state going in the right direction. And so with the right message and the right kind of ideas, I think they're very interested in what the next senator is going to be doing for them.
Do you get any feedback from the people you're talking to out in the field about, gosh, we have one sitting and one former 2nd District congressman running. Are they going to be able to represent the whole state? Are they going to understand our statewide interests and problems?
We don't hear that as much. It's an interesting race for people because for the first time in recent American political history, you have two people running for a major office who held the exact same position. We're practically neighbors. And so the records can be easily compared, which is different than when you have a mayor versus a governor or a state legislator versus a federal one. Here you have two people who held the same job in the same area, and so the records are very easy to look at. And so I think it actually makes it easier for the voters to determine who they want to have as their next U.S. Senator.
We talked in the opening of the show, and we've talked about it before on this show, about what the enormous national attention this race is getting. Of course, some of us here like to think the country's just now figuring out how important Oklahoma really is, but there may be other things afoot here. Why do you think we're getting so much attention, and how do you think nationally the attention is being perceived? Are they really interested in what Oklahomans are going to do?
I think there are a lot of people across the country who are very interested. A lot of journalists are coming to Oklahoma to cover this from major newspapers and news weeklies across the nation, across the world, really. And there are lots of reasons for it. I think one of them is they're interested in how it's a state that they see as so heavily Republican, a Democratic candidate who just drives his pickup around from town to town can be doing well in the polls, and that we have a chance to win. So I think that's something that really intrigues them, the kind of message that I'm talking about on the campaign trail that can make it competitive. And so I think that's one of the major reasons that people across the country are looking at Oklahoma.
Do you ask voters to look directly at this Senate race and what it can do for Oklahoma, or do you ask them to look nationally at how this could tilt the national perspective?
I ask them to look at electing the best person for the state of Oklahoma.
Regardless of how it affects the national politics.
Exactly. Now, take Don Nichols, who we're seeking to replace. He's been there for a quarter century almost. He has seen Democratic presidents, he's seen Republican presidents, he's seen Democratic control of the Senate, he's seen Republican control of the Senate. And this next senator will see all of those things. And that's why it's important to elect the best person for our state who can represent us through thick or thin, through Democratic presidents, Republican presidents, because those things are all going to change. And it's really important we just have the best person in office. And I hope the ideas that we presented on the campaign trail about getting rural Oklahoma going, jobs plans for central Oklahoma to build on the great work you were doing already here for Oklahoma City, that these are the kind of things people want to hear about. And they want a senator who will do this over many years.
Brad, I looked on your website prior to today, and there's some material on there that would suggest that perhaps there's some campaign funding issues that you've been concerned about, your campaign's been concerned about, particularly from the standpoint of fundraising from outside Oklahoma. Your website has been somewhat critical of some money that Dr. Coburn has accepted. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there's a group called Club for Growth that has made a major presence in the Senate race, and it's mostly a group of Wall Street investment bankers who have an agenda that is radically at odds with things that every Democrat and Republican in Oklahoma that I know of favors. They're against farming and ranching, calling them welfare recipients. They don't even think there should be an immigration policy. No controls on immigration at all, just completely open borders. They don't think there should be Social Security and Medicare. And they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, in the end probably millions of dollars, to elect Coburn because he wants to do those same things. And the money's not traceable. And more than that, in 1996, when outside groups tried to do this, spend money against Coburn himself when he was running for re-election, he decried it, said it should all be outlawed, and demanded that the Democrats take that money down. And he was right to do so. These outside groups said they're not reflective of what Oklahoma's all about. And the fact that they are spending so much on his behalf doesn't spell good things for the future of Oklahoma politics.
Politicians get labeled. Which labels are you most comfortable with? Which ones are you most uncomfortable with?
The one I'm most comfortable with is Oklahoman. Everything I've done in office, from every vote I've taken, every project I've worked on, has been to help the people of Oklahoma. And I always tell folks, they say, you're the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, and of course I am. And I'm proud to, carry the banner that people like David Boren held aloft, who gave me my start in politics. But mostly I'm a member of the Party of Oklahoma. And I think that's the big difference in the Senate campaign, is I want to use this powerful position to benefit the people of Oklahoma, to make these programs work for us, to push our state into the next tier where we need to be. And that's a big difference in Tom and I, who said doesn't have those same concerns and is not someone who is interested in kind of, how to make these things work for Oklahoma.
Dr. Coburn self-imposed a 3-term limit on himself when he was in the House, and then withdrew after his 3rd term. He has said on this show a couple of times that he is, if elected and if re-elected, he would only serve 2 terms. Contrast that with Don Nichols, who served, in most people's view, very admirably for many, many years, 24 years or something like that. Senator Inhofe is well past the 2-term limit, I think. What's Brad Carson's view upon a self-imposed term limit if you're elected to the Senate?
I don't think it does much good for Oklahoma. I've always said that term limits are a good idea when every state in the country abides by them. But to have people from New York and California who already take advantage of us in all of these programs, for them to have senators who rise to great power, while we have folks who, so by definition, can never do that, doesn't spell good things for us. The greatest senators we've had in our state have done so much. Don Nichols. Jim Inhofe has been in this business for 40 years, really, before I was born. Bob Kerr, Mike Monroney, Henry Bellman. These were people who, you know, they had the right vision. They were men of great integrity, but they recognized that we have to fight these other states to get our fair share back here, and that's what I want to do.
It seems to me, though, that the Democratic leadership in the Senate is farther to the left than Brad Carson. Can you rise in Democratic leadership without moving to the left?
No, absolutely. You know, you see all throughout the recent American history, you see a lot of Southern conservative Democrats rising to the very top of the committee chairmanships. David Boren did that, who was, you know, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And I will do that too. And because I'm going to be a swing vote as a conservative Democrat, I'm in a position to get more done. Right now in the U.S. Senate, it is those kind of people in the middle of both parties, and that's a fewer and fewer number who are really getting things done for their states, for this country. And so, you know, I'm really in a position to drive policy, make sure it works for Oklahoma.
Let's take a break. Congressman Brad Carson, candidate United States Senate, on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
First question.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, and our guest, United States Senate candidate Brad Carson. Last week we had former Congressman Coburn on, and we asked him to compare his record with yours. Now we'll give you the shot. Compare yourself with Dr. Tom Coburn.
I think we have very different visions of the job. This race is an unusual one in American politics because it's not so much between a Democrat or Republican, a conservative, a moderate, or a liberal. It's about someone who deeply cares about the future of Oklahoma and will use his position and has a record of using his position to benefit the people here who elect us, after all, versus someone who has no interest in those things. You know, my top priority has always been economic development. I keep a portfolio on my desk of job opportunities that can come here. We work with CEOs, corporate recruiters to bring them here. Tom doesn't think that's his job. He's open about that. You know, we have the worst roads and bridges in the country. The worst roads and bridges. No state has worse than we do, 50th out of 50. We have worked tooth and nail to bring back our own taxpayer dollars to build roads. Tom doesn't think that's the job of the U.S. Senator. In fact, when he held this very position in Northeast Oklahoma, he turned away the tens of millions of dollars that were otherwise allocated to come here. And for, you know, you here in Oklahoma City who care about the Crosstown Expressway, that's going to be funded by your next U.S. Senators. I'll do that. Tom won't. The bases. We have military bases all across Oklahoma. You have Tinker here in Oklahoma City. We have base closure in another year. We have to work to make sure that these bases are protected. I oppose further rounds of base closure. Tom favors them. We have worked with the bases to get them the kind of military construction appropriations that will make them immune from base closure. Tom doesn't think that's his job. We have fought to preserve Social Security and Medicare, to make them great programs for the future. Tom doesn't think that there should even be a Social Security and Medicare. These are very profound differences in how we view the job and our vision. For me, it's about helping Oklahoma. We have some very serious needs here, and the U.S. Senator can help address them. You know, Tom has always said on the campaign trail, Oklahoma is not my customer. When we talk about our plan for Western Oklahoma, he says, I don't think Western Oklahoma should have a plan. And when he was the 2nd District Congressman, you know, people will often ask him now on the campaign trail, they'll say, what did you do for your constituents in your 6 years you were there? 6 years. And he can't name a single thing. A Senate seat is so important, and you have to have someone who, like Bob Kerr, like Jim Inhofe, like Don Nichols, like Henry Bellman, like David Boren, will use it to benefit the people of Oklahoma. So the big divide in this campaign is about someone who will use it to benefit the people here versus someone who openly says that's not really what he cares about.
Let me ask you to go back to base closures just a minute, military base closures. I noticed a month or so ago there was an announcement from Washington that there were some plans to try to bring some of the foreign troops home to station, or reposition them at least, bring some of them home, position them some elsewhere. There was some discussion more recently that behind that movement was a concern in the Pentagon that base closures may be more drastic or dramatic than what we've seen in the past. You're sitting in the Congress right now. What's your sense of the risk that Oklahoma has to lose some of its bases?
Well, we are cautiously optimistic that all the bases will survive the next round of base closures. But we should remember that we're one of the very few states in the country that throughout the last 10 years have not had a base closure. And if we were to do that, it would be devastating to us. And there is no question, we are not doing all that we can to protect our bases. You know, you look at the military construction appropriation dollars that come back to Tinker, Fort Sill, Altus, Vance. We get a tiny fraction of every other state in this region. We get less back here, despite the 5 installations in the state, than Iceland does. And Iceland doesn't even have a U.S. senator. We could be doing more. And the competitors for Tinker here, the bases in Utah and Georgia, said they're working the case daily. And while we have every reason to believe that we'll be fine, we can't take it for granted. And that's something we're really going to work on in the U.S. Senate. And we will lie on the tracks to make sure there are no base closures in the state of Oklahoma. And that's a big difference in Tom and I, because he will openly say, I favor further base closures. Maybe not in Oklahoma, he says we'll try to protect it, but we should have more base closures. And he says, I'll do nothing to help on these military construction projects, these efforts to get more missions to each of the bases, to make them protected from BRAC. And that's something we're going to do, and we're going to protect these bases, because if we didn't have them, our economy would slump dramatically.
Define negative campaigning for me.
You know, I think negative campaigning is when you talk about personal issues, about staff members, about people's families, about things that are irrelevant to determining the fitness of people for the job. You know, I'm sure in this campaign, 15 seconds into Tom Coburn's acceptance speech on election night, you know, he laced into what he said were problems in my voting record. And I think that's legitimate to talk about voting record issues. You know, if I voted one way, if Tom has voted this way, if he's turned down road money, if he favors base closures, those are things that are important parts of a dialogue in a race this important. But there are limits to that, and you shouldn't attack people personally. You shouldn't attack people's families. You shouldn't lie about people's records and distort things, and you shouldn't be a demagogue on issues that are kind of irrelevant to the job of the U.S. Senator.
Will you be able to speak on how the national money that comes into this race is spent? Will you be able to say, I don't want you to do that, I'm drawing the line there, don't do it?
We have indirect ability to do that. We can't coordinate with any of these groups, and so they run it independently of all the candidates. An example, the National Republican Party has bought $2 million worth of television against me to run negative ads starting in the first week of September. And what we can do
That's this week.
That's this week, exactly right. Right as this show is on tonight, you'll probably see the first of those ads. And you're going to, you have the ability to go denounce that and tell the National Republicans, the National Democrats not to run those kind of ads because you think they're not right for the state, they're not part of kind of the vision you have of this job. And so you do have control over that.
Sticking on negative campaigning just for a minute and going to the Republican primary in this election, one of the candidates took after another candidate quite heavily, negatively. It seemed to have dual results. The person that did it got criticized widely. The person that got attacked, I think, to some extent, got hurt. If negative campaigning starts coming up between your campaign and the Coburn campaign, what will you do about it, or what should be done about it?
Well, you know, we've already challenged Tom not to go out and distort the records and not to be to misrepresent where we stand on these things. I think it's important you talk about the issues of the day. You know, that's what I'm interested in. I'm talking about how we can build roads and Tom won't, how we'll protect the bases, Tom won't, how when Mick Cornett and the mayor needs help, how I'll be there as a U.S. Senator. And that's the most important thing, Democrat or Republican you can be, is when you need help as a mayor, you have to have a senator you can reach out to, and Tom won't do that. Those are the issues we should be talking about. You know, the personal attacks, the slurs on people's character. So those things have no role in American politics. They've made people very cynical about the process, and it's a sad, sad statement.
We're almost out of time. I'd like to give you another minute to sum up whatever you'd like to tell the potential voters in Oklahoma.
Well, this is an important center race for the future of Oklahoma. We are really at a crossroads. Central Oklahoma is doing amazing things, and we have released a jobs plan that can take Central Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, to the next tier, making it a world-class center for research, for development, for jobs. For Western Oklahoma, those viewers listening here, I'm really the first candidate ever to offer a detailed plan, a book called Renewing Oklahoma's Frontier,
Hold that up.
that will talk about kind of the work we're going to do for Western Oklahoma. It's that I believe we have to have 77 counties of prosperity, and I'm going to use the Senate seat to help Democrats, Republicans alike, to benefit the state, to work for the state. I believe that Oklahomans are worth fighting for, and that's a big difference in Tom and I, that he has his own private agenda, but it's not the one that most people in this state care about for jobs, for health care, for roads, that will really help us. And at this critical time in our history, we need a senator who will fight for us. And so that's why we welcome Democrat and Republican support alike. If you care about Oklahoma, I need your vote in this campaign.
Congressman Carson, thanks for coming on The Verdict.
Thanks, Mayor.
Look forward to having you and Dr. Coburn on head-to-head next month.
Look forward to it.
Thanks.
Kent and I'll be back with the final word.
Thank you, guys.
Very well done.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here to wrap up our show with Congressman Brad Carson.
We've given you for 2 weeks in a row now, first Tom Coburn and then Brad Carson, and we hope that their views have been interesting to you. The comparison has been appropriate and useful in helping you make up your mind, but we're not through trying to assist our viewers in coming to some conclusions about what should be a pretty is so far hotly contested and should remain pretty tight race up until the day of the vote. We're going to be able to present to you a debate head-to-head with these two gentlemen in October. The date is yet to be determined, but it will be a 1-hour debate, and it will be on prime time during the week for an hour. And Mick and I will ask these gentlemen questions, and we hope that they will have a chance to ask each other questions. It will be a true debate format, but when we're finished, we hope that your views will have been crystallized if they are uncertain at this point, and we hope that on The Verdict here we've performed some kind of a service for our viewers to assist them in making the choices that they think are best for them. We're looking forward to that. Speaking of future shows, next Sunday we're going to have Joe Crawford. Joe is the director of the Sports City U Basketball Academy. He is considered by many to be the premier AAU basketball coach in Oklahoma, and we're going to be discussing how you do AAU basketball correctly.
Look forward to that. As always, we want to draw attention to websites that feature information on our guest. You can go to www.bradcarson.com for more information on Congressman Carson and his campaign for Senate. You'll also be able to order one of these books that his campaign staff has put together. It's about renewing Oklahoma's frontier, commitment to Western Oklahoma. So that's available on the web, and so is our website, theverdict.tv. Go there and tell us about a guest that you'd like to see on a future episode. For Kent, I'm Mick. We'll see you next time on The Verdict. That's all right.
All right, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
We'll just give Joe some extra.